Kenya, once again, thank you so much for joining me on this live. I'm very excited because, this month is National Black Business Month, and we're honoring therapists or individuals within the wealth space and highlighting individuals who are just trying to push the message forward on mental health awareness and advocacy. That's the whole reason for Legacy Speaks as a platform. And so you do a whole bunch of amazing things. And I know initially I wanted to grab you for LGBTQI plus Awareness Month, but this time around I just wanted to have a conversation with you as a therapist, as an entrepreneur, and how you personally tend to your mental wellness. So can you introduce yourself and let the people know a little bit more about you?
Yeah, so my name is Kenya Crawford. I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of New York. I am also a consultant on anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, mental health, sexuality, and gender. And lastly, I am the co-founder of On the Mend, which provides accessible healing specifically catered to people of color as well as LGBTQ folk. So I wear a lot of hats, but I think at the core of all of my work, it's really around creating generational healing for communities that haven't always had access to them.
I love that, generational healing, because I think oftentimes the trending buzzword has been generational wealth. And we're not looking at how important it is to tend to our mind and all the other dimensions of wellness. Obviously, like financial is one of the parts of the 8 dimensions of wellness, but we also have to focus on our emotions, our intellect, our social, like our relationships of that nature. And so with you wearing so many hats, how do you personally make sure that you are not only being fully present for your clients, but also being fully present in the different roles that you carry?
That's a really good question, and it's a question that's always ever evolving because it continues to change. And I think I've recognized, since graduating from graduate school and jumping into the field, I had to be flexible in my own healing and be flexible in my own wellness, because every day is not going to be a perfect day. Every day I may not meditate, I may not eat 3 meals, I may not show up in the best ways. So kind of giving myself the space to fail forward sometimes, but also exploring how I can institutionalize my own healing. So, one thing that has been really helpful, I love a good calendar. I love a planner. Those are the things that really bring me joy. But I even color coordinate my calendar. And one of those colors is yellow for my own self-care and wellness. So if I look at my calendar one week and I see that I don't have no yellow in there, I need to put it in there somewhere. I need a yoga class. I need to go running. I need some reading time. I need time to kind of pour into my cup, because I'm pouring into so many other people's cups throughout the day and throughout the week. So I got to make sure I'm well before I'm checking in with anybody else.
I love that whole phrase of institutionalizing your own wellness and being super intentional about it. I too color coordinate as well. Google Calendar, my best friend. Okay. And having those different options. And I think oftentimes we think about self-care as the manis, the petties, the going out for walks, that nature. It's important for us to redefine what that looks like for ourselves, whether it's paying bills on time or making sure that we're calling a friend or sitting around time just to lounge a little bit. Not being as hard on ourselves and showing ourselves the same compassion that we show other individuals. Love it, love it, love it. Speaking of compassion for other individuals, your jam is anti-oppression as well as anti-racism. For those who don't know what that is, I know that has been trending ever since Queen Mother Angela Davis said it, But can you tell people a little bit more about that and how important that is in today's society?
Yeah. And I think, with recent conversations with the social uprising that's really occurring, and I don't want to say it's new because people have been doing this for the last 400 years, but what we're recognizing is that it's now becoming a trending topic for companies to capitalize off of, for institutions to capitalize off of. And when we're talking about anti-racism and anti-oppression, I think the most important piece is that it's an active piece. It's an active, intentional piece around confronting the ways in which white supremacy and marginalization and oppression shows up in every aspect of our lives, in the ways that we communicate, in the ways that we hold conversations, in the ways that we create community or decide who we create community with, right? All of these systems of our society that has been steeped in white supremacy has shown us or maybe communicated to us what we should be doing or shouldn't be doing. And I think to be anti-racist and anti-oppressive means to constantly interrogate all of those pieces to ensure that we're creating lives that are equitable for everyone that is present, that allows marginalized folk to be empowered in so much of, you know, the work that they do or the way that they show up in the world.
Mm-hmm. That is so important, especially with that keyword equity, right? Because a lot of us are seeking equality in a system that really wasn't, it really wasn't built for that. It didn't create for that. And so finding ways to close the gap, like I think it was either today or yesterday, we were talking about wage gaps for women, especially women of color. So making sure that we're using our voice and finding ways to take what we do as therapists and infiltrate the system and providing consultation in a manner that is understandable and palatable and just relative across the board. So shout out to you for the work that you do.
Thank you. And I think, you know, what you just spoke to is actually what brought me to consulting. In my clinical work, I was consistently working with women of color who were coming in and really exploring imposter syndrome or really exploring the stress related to not being paid the same amount as some of their colleagues who had less experience or had less roles or responsibilities. And I got really frustrated because I was realizing that we can explore all the mindfulness skills, use all the CBT, all the DBT we want in this space, but that's not going to change your work environment. And that's what really brought me to consulting, because I wanted to stop trauma before it got to my couch. I wanted to explore this from a holistic lens so we could create spaces of healing in the workspace so people maybe didn't have to come to therapy to talk about all of this trauma that's showing up in their workspace.
Definitely taking the proactive approach. That is so important because our society is very reactive. We won't want to focus on the issue at hand until it actually blows up, right? Or until a video pops up on our feeds or until we have the protests and whatnot. And so you provide a different way or a different approach to addressing those things and to the point where, okay, yes, I'm going to still serve my clients, but let's find some ways to intervene prior to. So that's important.
And we're seeing that with so many companies now, right? They're coming out and like posting Black Lives Matter or posting a black box to really be performative in their activism, opposed to being proactive and recognizing that this has been present before, you know, COVID happened, before all of the social uprising. Where were you then? Where was that conversation then? And why are you starting it now in response to everything that's going on?
Trust me, I get it. I get it. I get it. And even when we were talking about that, I thought about the word accessible, right? And that is the undertone of what On the Mend Code is. And so can you talk a little bit about the accessibility and how important it is to close the gap, especially when it comes to finances? The number one thing that I hear from a lot of like clients or just even friends are like, I really want to go to a therapist, but it's a little expensive.
It is.
It is. And so for you and your co-founder, you guys have the opportunity and the ability to take larger concepts and break them down and make them a lot more digestible. And I don't want to give it all away, but I just would love for you to speak to that on what On the Mend Code is and how you got it. Yeah.
So On the Mend started out of two therapists, two Black queer women really coming together and recognizing that our wait list was getting way too long. And we realized that our community wasn't getting the tools and skills and healing that therapy provides. And while we were kind of confronting our own boundaries, our own discrepancies, and recognizing, well, we can't see everybody. Yeah. So what can we do, right? What can we provide to, you know, give people that bridge to therapy, right? I waited 9 months before I started working with my own therapist. And that process was so frustrating for me because, you know, I had the financial capabilities to do so. I had the flexibility in my calendar. I had all of these things, but she was booked. And I noticed that so many Black clinicians, so many queer clinicians are completely booked, and our community is not getting this healing that is needed, which is why we started On the Men, to provide people with this ability to engage in bite-sized healing that is also accessible, not only virtually in that all the courses are pre-recorded, but it's also financially accessible. We provide a sliding scale, and we also recently just launched a pay it forward program where people are able to donate a course or a freebie for someone because they have the financial means to be able to do so. So we really wanted to create an issue or create a way to provide accessibility to healing for predominantly folk of color and queer folk of color.
Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that you pointed out the idea of accessibility, not even necessarily meaning I can't financially afford it. The mere fact that we are really out there. As clinicians of color, we are out there, but with the changing of the times and us being more in the forefront, it's a lot difficult for individuals to kind of get booked or get their first session and whatnot. Or at least find somebody who's right up their alley. Like you mentioned, even with the LGBTQI plus community, a lot of trying to find clinicians who are affirming or can provide those spaces that are outside of the rigidity of the typical norms of our culture. So I love that.
And that traditional healing space doesn't work for everyone. And for a lot of the times, it doesn't work for folk of color, right? That one-on-one experience of working with someone every week for 45 minutes may not jive with you, and that's okay. So that's where On the Men could come in, and maybe you recognize that you want to work on anxiety for 4 weeks, and that's all the capacity that you have. So this gives you the space to work through that with these courses, opposed to waiting on a wait list to find a therapist, start working with the therapist, doing an intake for a couple of weeks, and then you start to finally talk about your anxiety, right? There's so many loops to jump through, and we wanted to eliminate a lot of those.
So, and even when we were saying the bridge piece, right? So making sure or creating ways for us to overstep all of that rigmarole, because it is rigmarole. Finding ways to overstep that to reach their target goals right then and there. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. I think oftentimes we as clinicians don't tap into our own personal experiences. And I think it's very important, especially when we're operating as an entrepreneur, recognizing that even the things that we experience from a humanistic perspective, we can take that and create things for other individuals, whether it's courses like you mentioned, or even curriculum, or even stepping into like the teacher role and educating other individuals, creating pamphlets and even content and stuff like that. I think that's just a beautiful thing. So if you are a healer watching this, I please implore you and I encourage you to just go at it and do what you need to do, because therapy is more than just a one-on-one individual. There's so many things that we can tap in to help our communities and create safe spaces.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. Speaking of creating safe spaces, I would love for you to talk about how we as a community can help foster safe spaces for queer folk of color.
That's a great question. And I talk about this a lot when I'm facilitating or leading groups, or maybe even sometimes in my individual therapy with clients. And I frequently share with them, I don't know if safe spaces actually exist. Right. I don't know if I can come in and say, this space is going to be safe because I asked you about your pronouns, or I went to this training before and I know how to create safety. Right. I challenge people to say, maybe let's create accountable spaces, spaces where if you are harmed, where something does happen, where you experience a trigger or microaggression, we've created a bound of expectations as to how we would move through this, right? We've created expectations for the community standards of recognizing that if you say something that harms me, I can name that, right? And we can have a conversation together and work through that together and build that foundational trust that is needed in spaces. Because what I've noticed in some groups, or even when I'm facilitating, when people say, yeah, this is a safe space, I can say X. Right? Or I can say X, Y, and Z, and then recognizing that what they just said after that was pretty harmful or pretty triggering, and they didn't mention that at first. So I say, you know, when we're having these tough conversations, what would it look like to create a space of accountability and not just safety?
It's interesting that you said that, because as soon as you said spaces of accountability, I work in the addiction sector. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, in a lot of like NA or AA meetings, they talk about honesty, openness, and willingness. And so
Mm.
even when we are calling for a sense of increased honesty, right? On the flip side, it requires some level of openness and willingness from the other individuals who are receiving this information. So when
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about like safe spaces, yes, the opportunity to be transparent, but also the willingness on other people's behalf to be respectful and honorable of what I'm sharing.
Mm-hmm.
That's very
Mm-hmm.
important.
Absolutely. And sometimes people don't recognize that what they're sharing can be harmful. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what happens is people get so worrisome about saying something that's harmful that they don't say anything at all. And I think
Right.
that's actually worse, right? Because we're not moving forward with that courageousness and saying that I may say something that harms you, that hurts you, but I'm willing and open to receive that accountable conversation afterwards.
Definitely, definitely. Love it, love it, love it. Oh my goodness, Kenya. Can you let the people know where you are, how they can find you, how they could tap into everything that you do via social media, your website? Just drop everything so people
Got
can
him for
know.
you. Got him. So on Instagram, you can find me at Kenya Therapy or at onthemend.co. In terms of websites, you can find me at kenyacrawford.com or onthemendhealing.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at Kenya Therapy. So
Love
thanks,
it.
y'all. I was so excited to be here with you.
Yeah. Hi, thank you so much, Kenya. I really
No
appreciate it.
problem. Bye-bye.